Felix here, guys, and we are talking about the infrastructure package of Biden. What does it do to particular stocks? Who benefits, who doesn't? That's what we're going to look at this. You might see a cat's tail in the picture here. You might hear a little bit of meowing. Apologies for that. Now, let's get straight into it, guys. As always, for every one of your likes, I donate 1 cent to, well, not the gentle button anymore. We have done a new poll, guys, and you have voted and you have selected the Farm Sanctuary as our new charity for the month. So we will be donating to them. I'll also be adding up our March totals. It should be somewhere above $300 US. And of course, I'll post my payment receipts for that, as always, over on the Patreon, guys. So let's get straight to it. I posted this chart here earlier on our Discord channel, which I think is a rather nice summary. Now, what do we care about as investors? Well, there is a lot of social stuff to this bill, but we're not really going to look at that because that doesn't really move markets, not substantially anyway. So there are about 600 billion for transport. In addition, there is 100 billion in terms of tax credits for the power grid, basically. Now, that should or could at least attract about 3 times the amount of private spend on top of that. So you might see another 300 billion there being spent by the private sector to actually attract those tax credits. And then you have a 100 billion for high-speed broadband. So basically Wi-Fi, I guess, in rural areas and that sort of thing. And that is generally speaking one of the best things governments can spend money on. Now, the other 1.2 trillion or so are essentially more on sort of social causes. And I'm not going into politics here, and I'm sure that's a very well and worthy cause, but it doesn't really give you the sort of return on investment that something like transportation, fixing roads, fixing bridges, and improving the power infrastructure and things like that do. So this isn't as big of an infrastructure bill as I think it really is built out to be, because they're chucking in quite a lot of stuff in there that isn't necessarily going to give at least financial investments a huge boost. However, there is still, 800 billion plus the private investment it'll attract. So it is still, a good 1 point something trillion that'll give us a real economic return from this government expenditure. How's it going to get paid for? Corporate taxes are meant to go back up to 28%. That's still lower than the pre-Trump era 35%. And at the same time, Biden says he wants to have a global minimum tax and he wants to sort of stop offshoring. Now, those last things, I think governments like to come up with those sort of things. The European Union also has similar plans. They might work on that together, but quite frankly, it is pretty hard to enforce because all it takes is for one little island somewhere to be low tax, and then you basically have a huge loophole. So I don't have huge hopes on that part. I think money, lots of money, will always find its way around taxation in some way or another. Now, is it going to get passed? Well, they need 60 votes for that. Or they can use that sort of tricky budget reconciliation process again in the Senate. Even that, I think, isn't that easy. We already seen the headline just here. Where was it? It was here. Infrastructure push sets off feeding frenzy in Washington. And that's basically all the lobbyists feeding, frenzying. Absolutely. That is, I think, more likely what we're going to see. We're going to see lots and lots of random little bits attached to this and probably wasting 100 billion on causes that are not particularly useful just to get this passed. But that's, that's democracy for you. There we are. So who are the real winners here? Well, transportation being the obvious one. Charging infrastructure. We at the moment have about 120,000 chargers in the US. The government builds another 500,000. That'll benefit EVs massively. Also, the government is actually going to buy EV cars and trucks and buses and all these kind of things. So that will massively benefit EVs, as will the infrastructure change to the grid, basically your electricity grid. High voltage power lines, storing. You're going to need massive amounts of batteries to store all the renewable energy because, well, if you've got wind farms and it's windy, you create a lot of electricity. When it isn't windy, or when it's too windy, you don't create any. So you have to store that electricity. For that, you need batteries. Now, what do you need for those batteries? You need lithium for those batteries. And I think that is, for me, one of the more attractive investment plays here. You can, of course, invest in things like the companies that are going to build the charging stations, for example, for EVs. But then I ask you, do you invest in the companies that build petrol stations, or do you invest in petrol stations themselves? Returns are not going to be great, I think, and there's no moat, and it's going to be very competitive. So I don't really see that as a great one. It might be a short-term, temporary spike in some of those stocks, absolutely. But I think in the long run, that probably isn't really where their money is going to be made. And as always, guys, this is not financial advice. This is just me and my fluffy friends here ranting. We found some goats also in this one, because the goats are our channel mascot here is a little goat. So don't take advice from the goats, guys. Always do your own research. So for me, the real play here is, yes, of course, EVs, but also the mining companies behind the EVs. And if you want to get a little bit more insight into that, see my daily trades. They are over here on the Patreon, guys, and I'll do a members only update every day with what I actually trade. And we have the most fantastic and well-researched raw materials channel basically for EVs. Literally on every single mine. If you just buy stuff with lithium in the name, you don't necessarily know, is it lithium from clay, or is it hard rock lithium? You understand the differences? Super important with mining to understand the process differences, what the costs are, which ones are proven, which ones are not. Location, of course, super important also. So there is a lot to, I think, learn from that sector. And if you want to get see my picks, which are also based on the picks of our research community here, and there is so much fantastic research in here. I highly recommend you come and check it out, guys. The way you do that is through the Patreon. There are still some lower tiers available here. Just dip your toes in. If you enjoy it, fantastic. If not, well, you've bought me a cup of coffee and 2 muffins, perhaps. So I think this is it's going to be good for the market overall. I think we're going to see a particular push in the EV sector. I think in certain mining stocks, we're going to see that. And yes, there will be some infrastructure plays, but am I going to start buying contractors who build roads and bridges, who typically have margins of 1 to 2% and go out of business when the economy tanks a little bit? Very unlikely. I used to work for a little while for one of those very large contractors in the UK, 100,000 staff or so, and they had that kind of margin, 1% or so. And I always thought, well, why don't we close this whole thing down and put it into government bonds? And that way we could actually plug the pension deficit in the company. But obviously they didn't want to do that, and then they went insolvent. And then they typically get bailed out by governments, and it's a little bit like airlines. So for me, that isn't really a huge appealing sector. Who is the loser in this? Well, probably oil. I would say oil is probably the one real loser from this. So I would at the moment think that is not a sector that's going to benefit particularly. However, to get this actually passed, there will be many amendments, and we'll have to really look into the details of what actually gets passed, how and when, how these tax credits, for example, how will they work? All those kind of details we're going to have to really study. And of course, I'll keep you up to date on that, guys. So all you have to do is smash that subscribe button, and I'll keep guiding you through the minutiae of this legislation, because it's a huge piece of legislation. It isn't just sort of giving checks to everybody. It's actually a real attempt at bringing the US economy and infrastructure into the next century, and to some extent catching up with the new economies in Asia, who the advantage is when you are a new economy is that everything you build is new. And it's the same you saw in Europe after World War II. Those economies boomed massively. I'm German originally. Germany had that massive boom in the 50s and 60s. Why? Because they built everything from scratch. So it was all the newest and the best in the world, and that's the advantage that new economies have. So the US here really working to catch up there and then get ahead. Same with advanced manufacturing and things like that. So it's going to be really interesting, actually, the next couple of weeks with this. Well, probably the next couple of 3 months or so, I would imagine, for this to get passed in some shape or another. And I'll keep you up to date on that, guys. So make sure you are subscribed. Come and check out our Discord channel, guys. It is the most well-researched and calm and friendly environment I think you can expect. We don't just jump up and down and shout to the moon and hope it happens. We actually think about what we invest in. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. I love love you for joining our community, for hitting that subscribe button. And if you enjoy the videos, do hit that like button too. Thank you very much for tuning in.